Last week, President Joe Biden announced his first endorsement since leaving office in backing Keisha Lance Bottoms for Georgia governor. Now, this was a significant development last week, and today we're going to be talking a little bit more about this governor's race coming up in November of 2026. This race will be significantly important for the Republican and Democratic Party, as Brian Kemp, the current governor, is term limited in his seat as governor of Georgia. Now, with this said, Keisha Lance Bottoms is the former mayor of Atlanta, and if we look at some of the latest polling between Keisha Lance Bottoms and some of the high-profile Republicans likely to run for this race, she leads every one, including Brad Raffensperger. Now, if this name sounds familiar, it's because President Donald Trump really did not like him in the 2020 presidential race when Brad Raffensperger would not, overturn the election of 2020 from the state of Georgia. He made it very clear that he was not going to do anything with that that President Trump wanted him to do, and that led to further tensions between Raffensperger and Donald Trump. Now, the likely outcome here is that we're going to have the Republican primary, give me one moment, between two candidates in a runoff. That could be Jackson and Jones in that Republican primary runoff. Likely, Brad Raffensperger will not be in that. So Burt Jones and Rick Jackson, both in a significantly interesting place nonetheless. Keisha Lance Bottoms leading both of them by significant margin. Now, the important thing is in the November election, including and also in the primaries, Keisha Lance Bottoms has to get 50% of the vote. Same thing with the Republican primary between Rick Jackson and Burt Jones. It's likely that this will run into a runoff between the two, where that will be decided at a later date. Now, keep in mind, these primaries are coming up in just a few weeks. We're filming this today on Monday, May 4th, and we expect the primary towards the middle of this month. So it will be a significantly interesting nonetheless, but I also want to take a moment and talk about the Democratic primary, especially given the news that President Biden has recently endorsed Keisha Lance Bottoms for this race. Now, Insider Advantage had a poll conducted April 28th through the 29th that has Bottoms up 36 points with 52%. Now, if she has this, she will automatically be the Democratic nominee if she can get over that 50% threshold. Now, we've seen some other polling conducted where she was only at 42%, but then we had another poll conducted at the same time that had her at 56%. So overall, this is going to be really interesting to see how this race develops. At this point, I think it's pretty likely, or at least somewhat likely, that Keisha Lance Bottoms wins a majority outright and does not have to face a runoff, which is significant because the Republican primary is likely to head into a runoff. So with that said, and with the news out that Biden has chosen to endorse Keisha Lance Bottoms for this race, what does this mean, and what were the historical odds 8 years ago when we were in a similar situation where President Trump had just been elected 2 years prior, we were in the 2018 midterms, etc.? Well, first of all, I want to take a look at the polling like we did at the beginning of the video. Brad Raffensperger is actually the best candidate to defeat Keisha Lance Bottoms in this race, according to polling at least. Brad Raffensperger 44%, Keisha Lance Bottoms 46%. Keep in mind, these polls were conducted at the beginning of April. All three of them were 407 likely voters, and all conducted by the same poll source. So, important nonetheless, but 10% are undecided between Brad Raffensperger and Keisha Lance Bottoms, where only 8 are between Bottoms and Jackson and Bottoms and Jones. So that's important as well, but Keisha Lance Bottoms certainly in a better position running against either Rick Jackson or Burt Jones, who are the current frontrunners for this seat, than she would be running against someone like Brad Raffensperger, where it would be very likely to go into a runoff. Keisha Lance Bottoms could make up this ground and actually win straight out in November. While that still might be unlikely, even in a runoff, seems like she's overall more approved of than Burt Jones or Rick Jackson here. and certainly could face a really good chance at winning this race overall. Now, if we take a look at the predictions overall, the Inside Elections has this as a tilt Republican race as of August of last year. The Cook Political Report, the Crystal Ball, and the race to the White House all have it as toss-up, which I agree. I think this race is completely toss-up. I think Inside Elections, having this as a tilt Republican, is a really interesting development nonetheless there. I mean, we're talking about a race that for president, for context here, for president in 2024 only went to Trump by 2.2%, and 2020 went to Biden by 0.24%. So of course, if we also look at the Senate race, we look back at 2022 where Warnock won this race by 2.8% in the runoff. 2020, both Ossoff and Warnock won in Warnock won in a special election in 2020 in those runoffs as well. So overall, this state is poised to turn blue at some point on the governor's level. And if we go back to 2018, that was the closest that we got to that happening in recent history. Brian Kemp only winning this race by 1.4%. I think overall we can agree that Brian Kemp was one of the best candidates that they could run. I mean, obviously Stacey Abrams towards the beginning of that race being called, she expressed concern about how the election would run, and with it being run by Kemp as then the Secretary of State, etc. But if we go back to 2022, she ran again and she lost by almost 8 points, 7.5% Brian Kemp won by in 2022. Now keep in mind, of course, this was a red style wave year, but overall still significant development. But if we head to 2026, I think this race is extremely close, to the point where Democrats actually have the chance to flip this race for the first time in a long, long time. Where, I mean, if we go back and we look, I mean, the last time that we see Georgia elect a Democratic governor, I mean, we just have to keep going back and back, was 1998. But I think 2026 might just be the year where Democrats can get that done and get it accomplished. Keisha Lance Bottoms certainly already facing high-profile names in her corner as endorsements, already facing a very likely outcome that she could win straight out later this month, and then we would have the Republican primary go to a runoff weeks later, which could give her a jump start on being able to campaign for Georgia voters, for all of Georgia voters. At this point, she's campaigning for Democratic primary voters, but once the primary is over, if there is no runoff, she will be all in on the general election, and that gives her a couple of extra weeks to jumpstart on that. So, with that said, let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think Keisha Lance Bottoms is the best candidate to run for Georgia governor? Do you believe that there's other candidates out there that are better? Do you believe that this Biden endorsement helps her? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the Instagram, Twitter, etc. down below. It's linked in the description. And as always, thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.